A recall effort to oust Republican Assembly Speaker Robin Vos has stalled amid suspected fraud. Plus, Governor Tony Evers ended the legislative session with signing and vetoing some bills in Madison. CBS 58's Emily Fannin with politics editor J.R. Ross discussed that and more in tonight's Capital Connection.
We begin this week with the push to recall one of the most powerful Republicans here at the state capitol, and that's Assembly Speaker Robin Vos. It was last week that more than 10,000 signatures were turned into the state's Elections Commission, but initial reviews showed that they were pretty short of the threshold needed to trigger a recall. Well, there was still room for Vos to file a formal challenge, and that's what he did. And what he called these signatures also was that they were woefully short. There's also now allegations of possible fraud into these signatures, so it's raising a lot of questions going forward, not only about the signatures, but about the process going forward with how a recall is even triggered here in Wisconsin.
So it's basically a three-pronged attack. The first one is this shouldn't be happening in the first place. Remember, the state Supreme Court in December found the maps used in 2022 are unconstitutional and barred their use going forward in an election. The new maps Governor Evers signed in February have a provision that says they don't take effect until the fall elections, the August primary, November general elections. We are in no man's land. Robin Vos is saying there is no map, ergo there can't be a recall. The second prong of that attack is no matter what district you might want to use, the one I was in back in 2022 or my new seat, they don't have enough signatures. So there's the second failure. The third is allegations of widespread fraud, forgeries, etc. For example, if you are a felon in Wisconsin, you have to complete your sentence, be eligible to vote again before you can circulate a nomination paper or a petition for recall. Vos is saying there are at least several people who may not have completed their sentences who are now circulators. They want all those thrown out. So now we have a timeline going forward where the petitioners get a window to respond. Vos can then answer, and we should know within 2 or 3 weeks what the Elections Commission is going to say, because they have to determine were these petitions sufficient. Oh, by the way, the state Supreme Court's been asked to say which map should be in place. That could play a factor in how the Election Commission rules as well. All
right, and staying on the topic of elections leads into our next topic after a former Milwaukee election official was charged with ballot fraud after a 2-day trial in the city. The jury found Kimberly Zapata, she's the former deputy director of the Milwaukee Elections Commission, guilty of illegally sending military absentee ballots to voters that didn't even exist. Now, during the trial, her attorneys argued that she was trying to expose flaws in the system. They called her, quote, a whistleblower. Because of how she was able to do this through the My Vote system, because military voters right now don't have to show an ID in order to obtain a ballot. Meanwhile, prosecutors have maintained throughout the entire trial that she was a fraudster, not a whistleblower. So this is just something that we've been following for quite some time, but it also just leads into, JR, that this is still an issue that is going to be widely talked about here at the Capitol.
Don't forget Harry Waite, an activist down in Racine County, did something similar, requested the absentee ballots of Assembly Speaker Robin Vos. We've seen Mayor Corey Mason. He's awaiting trial. This doesn't bode well for his chances, because the argument I heard from people this week was, look, you don't go into Best Buy and steal a TV and say, tell the cops, look, I was testing the security out. Like, if you're a real whistleblower with election fraud, you go to the proper people to set this up. It's not going to go away, but it's also not going to solve the issue or really address it if you do things like this.
And now that the legislative session has come to an end, of course, this is the time where the governor signs a lot of bills. So we're just going to highlight some of them, some kind of the big ones that he did this week. And a lot of them are actually election themed, JR. Some of the bills that he signed would require campaigns to disclose when AI, artificial intelligence, is used in campaign ads. It would also prohibit last-minute closures of polling places. This was a big one in Milwaukee during the 2020 election in April, when it was the heat of the pandemic. They couldn't find enough workers, and it led to only Milwaukee having 5 polling locations, so it was kind of a little chaotic. Another proposal that he signed into law would crack down on catalytic converter thefts. Now let's talk a little bit about the veto ones, because these are a lot of Republican election bills that we kind of had a sense that he was going to reject, such as modifying how close someone can stand next to a poll worker and having an automatic post-election audit.
All this was driven by 2020 complaints voters heard from their base of, for example, the poll workers or observers. If you're observing at the polls, right now state law says no closer than 3 feet, no farther than 8 feet. During the COVID pandemic, they were pushed toward that 8-foot maximum quite often. They said, we can't see, we can't hear what's going on. Evers said in his veto message, I'm not going to open the door to pressure or intimidation from election observers at the polling sites. That's one of the reasons. No surprises here. More vetoes to come.
There's also a reckless driving bill that he's likely going to sign into law next week, so that's something we're tracking. All right, that will do it for this week. Thanks so much for joining us.